Welcome to the Infidel, podcast of the damned, the weekly companion show of the Infidel News. Join us as we discuss this week's religious accounts from an atheist perspective. From Timbuktu to Toledo, from Kathmandu to Canada, from Bangalore to Bangladesh. We deplore, you deride. And here are your hosts, Dave and Nicole.
Hello, and welcome to show number 22 of the Infidel Podcast of the Damned. I'm your host, J. David Core, atheist, author, and antiquarian astronaut. And with me is my co-host, Nicole Simard. Hello, Nicole.
Hello, everybody.
Also joining us today is political activist Mike Newdow. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you very much.
Today is Thursday, April 2nd, 2015, and we're going to be discussing the upcoming episodes of the Infidel News, which will run beginning Monday, April 6, 2015. Show notes for all of our podcasts can be found at infidelpodcast.blogspot.com. And for our regular viewers, just to let you know, we have a little bit of a different format thing today. We're going to be joined for a little while by our guest, Michael, and then we're going to move on and just do the stories with me and Nicole. But while Michael's here, some of you may recognize his name. He's internet famous for something from a few years ago. What year was that?
We went to the Supreme Court 2004.
2004. Was that long ago? Doesn't seem like it was that long. Yeah. In 2004, Michael sued the government to have One Nation Under God taken out of the pledge. Is what it was. Right. And the Supreme Court decided not to, he won in the Ninth Circuit, and the Supreme Court decided not to hear that case because he didn't have standing. And you want to go ahead and give us the background on that again?
Yeah, I was claiming that it was an injury to myself when my daughter is told every morning that she should stand up and say her father's religious beliefs are incorrect. And so the Supreme Court said that I had Article 3 standing, but came up with this thing about prudential standing. Prudential standing is this idea that courts, the federal courts, should not hear certain cases that, I mean, there are different reasons, but in this case, that the states generally have jurisdiction over. And they claim that this was a family law case, which it actually was not. And not only that, but if you're going to use prudential standing and the idea that we don't want to step on the toes of the state, and it seems to me that what they should have done, if they really were true to that idea, is they should have asked the state. And there's a way to certify questions to the state Supreme Court and say, do you really want us to take away the right of your citizens to come to the federal courts and have their claims adjudicated when there's an alleged family law issue, which, again, this wasn't. But even if it were, I'm not sure the people of California or the Supreme Court would say, no, we don't want our citizens to have the right to go to federal court. But that's what the Supreme Court, saying that they didn't want to step on the toes of California, concluded. So, a long-winded answer, they didn't hear it. So.
Yeah. So if they had gone to the state and asked them that, and the state had, for whatever reason, said no, we don't want that, that would have affected every state going for every decision going forward from California, right?
No. I mean, it would have if anyone could have said anything had to do with family law. I mean, basically,
right.
It said nothing to do with it. If there's a family law issue, somebody could always have said, oh, well, this involves family law, and under the Elk Grove case, we're not, you shouldn't hear the case. So,
right.
But that's a different issue from the religious freedom matter. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and now you're involved in another religious freedom issue.
Correct. This was actually the one I originally started. The whole reason I got into this was because I saw In God We Trust on all our coins and currency. I said, wait a second, I know I heard something in law school about this, and it doesn't sound right. And started doing the research and found out it isn't right.
Yeah.
So, as we all would imagine.
Right. Well, I mean, it's just prima facie on the First Amendment. Since it was Congress that made the motto "In God We Trust," that's just a blatant violation of the Establishment Clause.
I would think so. Yeah. I mean, even Justice Scalia says government may not lend its power to one or the other side in controversies over religious dogma. I mean, what greater controversy over religious dogma is there than whether or not God exists?
Right.
Just that in God we trust, knowing that there are Americans who, and it doesn't, and the Bill of Rights doesn't apply only to Americans, that there are people here who don't believe in God. It's pretty arrogant, I don't know, statement to make, and
right.
certainly an unconstitutional one.
Yeah, but not only people who don't believe in God, also polytheists.
polytheists and people who believe in God and think that you shouldn't be putting, his name on our coins, and you shouldn't be making our national motto, and that people should be allowed to believe what they want without government weighing in on their side or not on their side, either way, which is what the framers were saying.
Well, if you're a Buddhist, it would be weird to be saying, one nation under God.
Or in God we trust, right? Yeah, or a Hindu, or a polytheist like a Wiccan, But so what?
Or a Christian who believes that government should stay headless and that people should.
Right.
That's one of the arguments that was made at the founding, was that not only is this bad for the people who are outsiders, but it's bad for the people who are insiders, because we don't want government getting involved in our religion. All of us, we have conflicts that we don't want.
Right, which is where the original idea of separation of church and state came from, was the Danbury Baptist letter, which was Baptists asking, how do we know that the state isn't going to make Episcopalianism the state religion again?
Right. I would just say that it wasn't actually, it goes back beyond that. Actually, Roger Williams talked about the separation of the garden of the church.
Okay, yeah.
It's a long time.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as it being considered a constitutional idea, was the first mention of it was.
Yeah, certainly Jefferson in his letter used that term. So
right,
and that's you always hear the monotheists who want government advocating for their religion, of course. You always hear them saying, "Well, separation of church and state isn't in the Constitution." It's a ridiculous argument. Separation of powers, that term isn't in the Constitution either. It's a million ideas that we use different language for. I mean,
right.
They have some pretty bogus arguments.
So what is it you're doing right now as far as your new program?
So this one actually I've already brought twice and lost, but now I'm doing it with RFRA. I did bring RFRA in the past, but now we have two new Supreme Court cases with the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, RFRA, and every justice, every time that RFRA has been heard, including these last two cases, has upheld the idea that RFRA means what it says, that the government cannot infringe on people's religious exercise without a compelling interest, and the burden of proof is on the government to show that they have a compelling interest and that they've narrowly tailored their laws to serve that interest. And so I'm making the argument, forget the Establishment Clause, even though it's flagrantly in violation of the Establishment Clause to have in God we trust on our coins and currency. Forget that, because that argument, the justices and the judges keep coming up with these ridiculous arguments. So I'll assume that every judge will be dishonest and come up with these bogus arguments. But they've only done that for the Establishment Clause. They haven't done that for RFRA. And the Supreme Court, every justice has said that RFRA means what it says. So I contend that it is a substantial burden on the exercise of any individual to be forced to carry around a message that is the complete antithesis of what they believe. I think, for Jews to say that Jesus is the Messiah, and for the government to say, hey, you got to carry this on your body from now on, or to tell Christians that Jesus is a myth, I think that the world would go crazy if either of those things happened. And that's exactly what happens now. Atheists are forced to carry the idea that we trust in God.
Right, and Christians actually use that as a cudgel too, because they will say, well, it says so on the money. You'll hear them say that.
For sure, yeah. And that's again, one of the reasons that we don't want government getting involved, because that turns people into insiders, outsiders. We believe in Sharia law, we're the real Muslims, or whatever. It works. And we see that, we're spending, how much of our GDP, fighting this idea, how many people are getting killed because of, people who think their religion is the one that everybody should follow. And then here we are, the bastion of religious freedom, doing the exact same thing. Certainly not as grossly, but it's certainly the same idea.
Same idea, yeah. And so, what is it that you're trying to get all the different circuits to have a certain number of people represented?
Correct. Out of the 12 circuits, there's 11 numbered circuits. The circuits, for those who don't know, you'll hear, the 9th Circuit, the 8th Circuit. You guys are in the 6th Circuit, Ohio. The circuits are geographically arranged. There's 11 numbered circuits, and then there's the D.C. Circuit, and there's also the federal circuit, but that one you don't have to worry about. So out of those 12 circuits, the 11 numbered plus the D.C. Circuit, 5 have already ruled that in God we trust is okay. So you can't argue it again there. You can, but you get thrown out immediately because of stare decisis. But the other circuits, there are 7 other circuits that exist, and they haven't ruled on this question. And so I'm getting plaintiffs for every one of those circuits. We're almost there. We're getting pretty close. I want to have 10 plaintiffs, hopefully 2 organizations. And I'd like to, of those 10 plaintiffs, I'd like to have children, because the Supreme Court has essentially said that when children are involved, then we're really going to take the Constitution seriously, whereas we may not when there are adults involved. So I want to have 2 plaintiffs with children as well. And we're going to bring the case in all 7 circuits and hope that somewhere in the United States, there's a federal circuit where 2 judges will actually uphold, if not the Establishment Clause, then RFRA, which is a statute. And especially since every single justice on the Supreme Court has said it means what it says. You cannot infringe on people's rights without a compelling interest, and the burden of proof is on you, the government, to show you have a compelling interest. And I argue that it's impossible to show you have a compelling interest to put in God we trust on our coins, when for the first, in 90 years, we managed quite well to get around without having that. And most other nations managed to get around, do quite well without having religion on their coins and currency.
Right. I have agreed to be one of the plaintiffs if you need me, and my daughter. So yeah. So that's at least 1 out of Ohio, right there down.
Yeah, but as I say, we're pretty close. I don't know how many. I say we have about 6 or 7 average numbers of plaintiffs in each of the 7 circuits. So we're almost there.
Right. And if somebody wanted to, that's watching our show today, wanted to get involved, what would they do?
Thank you very much. It's nice of you to mention that. They would write to No More IGWT, which is No More in God We Trust, at gmail.com, and say, hey, I'd like to be a plaintiff. I think this is a great idea, and let's get these offensive words off of our coins, and let's get back to the idea that all religious views will be shown equal respect by the government of the United States.
Cool. Just so our audience also it knows, you're looking for people with children specifically. Is there an age limit on the children for
anyone minor children? So kids under 8. Real young kids are even better, but because then they always make the excuse, well, when they're 16, they're kind of like adults. I mean, we really don't have to uphold the Constitution like we don't when they're true adults. So younger is probably better. But just to correct kind of what I think you inadvertently may have said, we want plaintiffs without children too.
Right.
I just want to have at least 2 in each circuit, just so I can make the argument. Hey, you guys talk about special attention being paid to children. Here we have children, and so show that special attention.
Right. So, but if somebody does become a plaintiff, what about is there any way to become a plaintiff anonymously, or is that only for the children?
That's only for the kids. We will protect every case I've brought. I don't know, 3, I think, cases where we've asked for the names to be under seal of the families that have children, and that's been granted in every case. And that's serious stuff. That for the attorneys are required to maintain confidentiality, and if they do not, then they'll get they're thrown in jail. I mean, the judges take that seriously. As a matter of fact, there's only one little box that you have to check when you file documents. We have electronic filing now, and the only thing that pertains to is there something under seal here, because the whole federal system is based on the idea that when things are under seal, they have to be kept confidential. So your children, if you're concerned, those children will not be known to anyone except the attorneys, and the attorneys are obligated to keep that confidential. So yes, and there's nothing else that the only thing people have to do is say they want to do it. I'll send out a little contract, because as an attorney I'm required to have that, so you know exactly what the representation entails. You don't have to pay anything. If you would like to contribute, that would be great. Each circuit, I just did it, and it's under $2,000 for start to finish, including printing the briefs, paying even if you go to the Supreme Court and ask for certiorari, it's not much. With 10 plaintiffs, that would be $200 a piece. But even if they were not to pay, we'll find the funds. So there's no financial burden. The only thing really you have to do is I will send out a little blurb that says, okay, tell us how this affects you, and they'll come up and say, this stuff bothers me, or or every time I look at my coins, I see In God We Trust, or every once in a while when I look at my coins, I see In God We Trust, and I know it offends me, it hurts me, it makes me feel like an outsider, whatever it is that you feel, I need you to put that in writing. So.
Right. Okay. You said something about if somebody wanted to contribute that they could, like if like say I wanted to, it's going to cost $2,000, and if I wanted to participate in that, I could. Is there any? Do you have anything set up like a Patreon or a GoFundMe?
Not yet, but we will be doing that. So,
Okay.
yeah, and usually I don't have a nonprofit, so you either have to send it to me in my name, otherwise I can't cash the check, or usually I can find an organization that will serve as a nonprofit, and you can donate through them. But we're not up to that yet. Right now, I'm just.
Okay. And is there an online presence anywhere where people can read up on this?
Not yet. All of this is still coming along. I'll be posting all the information and all the filings as they go along. But
Okay.
a little behind, unfortunately.
Do you have
when you get any?
Do you have any kind of timeline?
Yeah, I'm hoping I'm going to do this by the true birthday of our nation, June 21st, which happens to be a Sunday this year. So it'll be Monday, June 22nd. But hopefully I'm going to have it filed in all of the circuits on that date. That's the day that the 21st was when New Hampshire ratified the Constitution, became the 9th state, and that was the official time where all of a sudden, that was the moment when we came into being as a nation. So I'd like to do it on that date.
Okay. Just as a suggestion, when you are ready to do this, you're probably already doing this anyway. Just I don't know if you're doing this or not, but are you going to be contacting all of the blogs like Greta Christina and Friendly Atheist and all of them and let them know what's going on?
I will try. And if anyone wants to help, if anyone has time, it's helpful, especially setting up the website.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We lost you there.
Nicole, could you? We lost your audio for a second there.
Sorry. Yeah, just saying that if anyone has expertise setting up websites, which is I guess getting pretty easy now, wouldn't mind helping. I'd love the assistance because I'm very short on time, as many of us are. But we'll get it done one way or the other.
Okay. Whenever you get, since we're in contact, since I'm going to be one of your plaintiffs and we're in contact, I assume that I'll be getting updates. As you give me updates, I'll be sure and put it on the show and let people know when there's an online site where they can, if there's a place where they can donate, when they can donate. I'll be sure and keep people informed of all that. Okay. Thank you for your time, and we don't want to keep you any longer than we have to, but it was great having you on, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Mike Newdow for participating in the podcast. He did a great job, don't you think, Nicole?
Oh, he did a fantastic job. He was a great guest.
Yeah, that'll be pretty interesting. Yeah, that'll make a good show. So now here we are. It's Holy Weekend.
Oh yes.
And yes, Holy Weekend. Yes, it's Easter is this Sunday. The interview that we did with him was on Maundy Thursday. So it's a big week for the Christians.
Oh, and except for Easter itself, I used to think as a kid that it was the most boring weekend of the year. I hated it.
Me too. Yeah, me too. Yeah, and all the stuff that you do for Easter is boring stuff. It's coloring eggs and Easter egg hunts and getting dressed up and having your picture taken, and even the dinner. Ham is the most boring dinner.
we didn't do any of that, so no Easter egg hunt or anything like that where I was. But I grew up in the days when cable did not exist. I'm a pre-cable guy, so we only had 2 TV stations, and all they were showing during that weekend, especially on Good Friday, was boring stuff, boring church stuff. Very old movies, all black and white. It was terrible.
Yeah. Constantine and the Cross.
Yes.
That was one of the movies that we used to have to see all the time. Did you know there's a celebration the day after Easter The Polish have a celebration, which is you know how Mardi Gras is the day before Ash Wednesday,
Yep.
right? And it's a big celebration because you're going to give up whatever you're giving up for Lent. So they have Mardi Gras as a celebration before. The Polish do it better because they have their big celebration the day after Easter. So it's like you're done without all this time, and now you have your holiday, and they call that holiday Dingus Day.
Oh,
Dingus Day.
Dingus
Day. Monday. Dingus. Dinghus, I think. Dingus Day. So and everybody eats hard-boiled eggs and Polish sausage.
Ugh.
But it's a big celebration. Everybody goes to the bars too. So the bars are
more interesting.
Yeah.
Well, this is the Happy Dead Jesus weekend.
Yes, Happy Zombie Jesus weekend. And let's don't forget our Jew friends. It's also Passover.
Yes, it is.
The day that God slaughtered everybody unless they killed an animal and smeared its blood on their lintel. The most violent holiday in all holidays is Passover.
But then that brings up a question. Did God really need a dead animal's blood on the door to know the difference between who was Jewish and who wasn't?
No, exactly. Yeah. There's an episode of South Park. Where Kyle or Cartman is making fun of Kyle for being Jewish and everything, and Cartman ends up having a dream that he's the son of the Pharaoh during the time of the plagues, and he walks up to Kyle and he's making fun of his God and everything, and Kyle says something about God's going to get even, and then all of a sudden it starts raining frogs. And Cartman says, "What's going on here?" And Kyle says, "It's raining frogs. It's one of the plagues God sent. It's God's retribution." And Cartman says, "That's supposed to be a retribution on us. It seems like he's just being a dick to frogs."
Yeah.
He's just being a dick to frogs. How's this hurt the Egyptians? It's just a bunch of dead frogs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, well. Yeah. Shall we start the first story?
Yes, let's do our first story.
For several months, anger aimed at Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has grown over a series of incidents in which Christians have been victimized and had their properties vandalized. The most recent event involved an attack wherein a 70-year-old nun was raped. This attack occurred at a convent school near the town of Ranganat in West Bengali state. Even though the surveillance videos led the identification of 4 of the assailants, no arrests have yet been made. Chief Minister of West Bengal, Mamata Banerjee, has appeared to turn a blind eye to such incidents in the past, and following this attack, her vehicle was blocked by an angry mob after she paid a visit to the nun. Calls for action have come from all quarters, and in February, Prime Minister Modi promised to crack down on religious violence. Many, however, are growing impatient as they wait for these promises to be followed up by more than mere words.
Yay!
So Modi, who campaigned for election on a hardline pro-Hindu front, is now faced with the backlash of that kind of campaign. What always happens when you run that kind of campaign is your supporters start acting like dicks, and now he's got to deal with his dick supporters, like he's going to stamp down on them. He's not going to stamp down on his own supporters.
Nope. And by the way,
No.
I'm going to teach you a little bit of French now. Do you know what Modi means?
Modi?
Yeah.
Or Modi?
Yeah.
In French, M-O-D-I?
Yeah. Well, it's not spelled M-O-D-I, but it's pronounced the same way.
Okay. Well, no. What's it mean?
Damned.
Damned. Really? So
yes.
So his name means that he's damned in French. That's it's interesting. Yeah.
But there's no way
I did not know that.
Yep. So now you and our listeners have learned a little bit of French. You know, the damn Indian president is doing some damn shit to the damn Christians.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
no.
So
Yes, I was going to say that the people who elected them are right wings. The people who are doing this shit to the Christians are right wings, and so he's going to hurt the people who voted for him. No way.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And they only feel emboldened to do this because of his policy, because of his platform. His platform has led to this kind of thing. It's got everybody riled up. It's like it would be like voting for a Nazi in Germany and then being surprised when the Nazis start going around beating people up.
Exactly. Exactly. And so there's no way. And this is quite something different also when you compare it to what North American Christians call being, just because I want to say the word now, persecuted. Yes.
Yeah. 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 Christians in America think they're persecuted because they're not allowed to be the bullies.
Exactly. They cannot be bullies.
Right.
So
right.
that's
And
persecution.
right. These people, these Christians in India are being raped. That's persecution. That's actual persecution. And
their churches are being burnt.
The church, their churches are being burnt. That's not what this story was about, though, was it? It was about a rape. Did they mention Did they mention?
No. That wasn't about the rape. That's another story.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So it's charming. It's charming. Yeah.
There's so
but
much
again,
stories like that we cover. It's we get all mixed up about.
I know. Yeah, there was a story. There was a story today. I'm sure that we're going to be covering it, but I just heard about it today, so I don't know if you've seen it or not yet. But where the heck was it? Actually it was April 2nd, so that would have been yesterday, and it was somewhere, I forget where it was, a Christian church somewhere, or a group of Christians somewhere. They some hardline Muslims somewhere came in, sent all the Muslims that were there out, and then killed all the Christians. But they actually made the Muslims leave first. And that just happened. Did you hear about it?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, I can't remember where it was. I'll have to find the story and send it to you so you can, make sure that we get it covered. But yeah, it's happening. It happens all. It's everywhere. Whatever group you are, if you're the minority, watch your ass. Unless you live in a secular country, like the United States or Canada or Australia or Switzerland.
How about that 31-year-old Indian woman in Indiana? Did you hear about her?
What happened?
No? The thing is, she had she lost her baby when she was pregnant. And so, because she lost the fetus, and the fetus is dead, she was convicted of feticide.
Oh, feticide. I did hear about that. Yes.
Yes, and now she's going to spend the next 20 years in jail.
Yeah, but I think that's going to get overturned on appeal.
I hope so.
Yeah, I did hear about that.
And that is persecution, I think, from the Christian right.
It is persecution from the Christian right, but it's not religious persecution against her for being Indian.
No,
it's persecution against her. No, it's just them. It's them pushing their. But that kind of thing ends up getting squashed. The higher it goes, the more people that challenge it, the higher it goes. Federally, it gets squashed.
Well, I hope so, because this is ridiculous. And the thing is, Indiana is not the only state that has this law. There are more
there's
states.
A couple. No, there's a couple.
Actually, the vast majority of the U.S. has that law. Only a handful don't, like something like 8 or 9. The rest all
but it's different. It's different in every state. So it's not like, in most states it has to be like a direct intentional thing, and it's after a certain number of, every state, like it's different trimesters or different number of weeks or different number of months. They all have their own rules, and so it varies from state to state. But yeah, a lot of the states do have a similar statute.
Yes, and that makes me sick to my stomach.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and move on to the next story, and we'll see how it connects to the story from before.
All right, here's the second story.
Communism might no longer be the law of the land in Russia, even though the Communist Party is still active. Also still active are some of the religious prohibitions instituted under communist rule, or at least vestiges of them. For example, religious organizations that wish to engage in any public show of their faith must in some cases notify and receive permission from government authorities or face stiff fines. Post-communist laws introduced in 1997 and 2004 defined areas where religious activities were prohibited, other areas where they could be practiced freely, and a category in between where notice must be given. But since then, enforcement has been erratic, with instances of fines being levied where the law said they should not. Under communist rule, judicial matters were left largely up to local officials with little right of appeal. Amendments to these laws instituted in 2014 attempt to clear up the confusion and provide consistency, but there's still a matter of how they're interpreted by different judges. There remains much confusion about what is allowed and what is not, as well as where it is allowed and where it is not.
Okay, so what we have here is a situation where in Russia, which used to be officially atheist but is no longer officially atheist, the vestiges of the atheism that was state atheism, not which, if you consider atheism to be a religion or religious purview, then it was atheism that was persecuting Christianity. The difference being, and I don't know, it's a hard point to make to Christians because they don't seem to understand the difference, but the difference being that when you have a country, like say for example, you have the United States, where the Christian right wants to impose rules like the thing in Indiana or Prop 8 or whatever, or, no gay marriage or any kind of blue laws for alcohol. That's all based on their Christianity. In communist Russia and communist China, it wasn't really based on atheism, because there's nothing in atheism that says crush religion or do this thing or do that thing. But the state feels threatened by religion as a movement to usurp power. So it's actually the state suppressing religion for state reasons and not religious reasons.
Yep. And
yeah.
Because it's religious persecution again, I use the old hammer and sickle over the star, because and saying it's back to the good old days, because there was religious persecution back in the communist days.
Right. Yeah. And for the most part, I mean, there are anti-theists out there who may be basically, there may be some anti-theists that are in favor of crushing religion in the United States, like just making it illegal, or in Canada, or in Australia, or in Sweden, or anywhere like that. Any of these secular places, there may be atheists like that, but they're not the majority. And the communists under Stalin and under Lenin, they were following the Marxist idea that religion is the opiate of the masses, and that if you allow religion to have power, and it's actually an accurate idea. The more power you give to religion, the worse. Look, we see it today in India, and we see it in Iran and Saudi Arabia, and we see it in Israel. The more power the Jews, the Orthodox Jews take, the harder it is, the worse it is for everybody. Religion does tend to have that problem with it. The more power you let them have. In 11th century Europe, the Christians were they obliterated science. They obliterated freedom. So when Karl Marx says, religion is the opiate of the masses, and when the idea of in communism of keeping religion down, it's not because of the atheism, it's because of the needs of the state, which I already said, but I'm trying to just clarify that point.
So, actually, the next week, our guest is going to discuss with us the fundies, or the religious people's fear of people without religion, of their fear of secularism, and how it is ruining things around the Middle East.
secularism is, or their fear of secularism is?
The fear of secularism is
Uh-huh.
partly responsible for the situation in the Middle East today. That's going to be a topic we're going to be discussing next week with our
Right.
guest.
Well, that's like that. There was a story we did a couple of weeks ago about the kind of propaganda that ISIL is using to attract Western women, and basically, the kind of women that it would attract would be women who think that they have more dignity under Sharia law, that because under secularism, men leer at women, and men are have this idea of ownership over women. It's kind of there is a double-edged sword there, because there is a little bit of truth in that. It's not truth in that religion has a better answer, but there is truth in the idea that the more freedom you give people, the worse the worst of them behave. That's hard to say.
Now, if anybody understood what David just said, please send us an email to.
Yes, could you translate that for me? Because I'm not sure what I meant. No, I know exactly what I meant. But the more freedom that you have, the worst of us act worse.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So
it brings out
that's
the
all.
worst in us.
There you go. Yeah. Yes. It brings out the worst in the worst of us. It doesn't bring out the worst in everybody. Freedom does not really bring out the worst in everybody. It brings out the worst in the worst.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. And now we've made it a lot clearer for our audience.
Oh, yes. Now we understand.
Aren't we great?
My incoherent babbling. Okay, let's do story number 3. This whole thing full circle.
Okay, here's story number 3.
Vigilantes in Lahore, Pakistan burned 2 men to death on suspicion that they were complicit in a suicide bombing attack which damaged 2 Christian churches, one Catholic and the other Protestant, killing several persons and injuring up to 50 others. A Pakistani Taliban offshoot called Jamatul Ahrar has taken credit for the bombings. The attacks also led to the protest demonstrations by those upset with the government they see as doing too little to keep them safe. The protests turned violent after a car struck several protesters. The police restored order with tear gas canisters and batons. Many fear that Pakistan's anti-terrorism efforts may be stoking animosity against minority religions. A minorities' rights activist and lawyer named Akmal Bhatti was quoted by the news agency DW as saying, "Terrorists who are tried for murder get sentenced to death by hanging, and terrorist organizations are against this policy." Pakistan is over 98% Islamic.
So now what we're finding here is that the situation is that we have a country that used to be very secular, has gradually become less and less secular, and the radical Islamic wing in that country is basically running roughshod over their minority again. And you have right next to each other, you have the story we started with. We have India, and the story we got here now, we have Pakistan. They're right next to each other with this little tiny buffer in between called Kashmir, which is half and half. And the Islamic majority is going after the Christians and the Hindus in Pakistan, and the Hindu majority is going after the Christians and the Muslims in India. In both of those cases, you know that the Muslims in India and the Hindus in Pakistan, being minorities, are wanting a stronger secular government.
Yep, absolutely. And just to make it more interesting, we should have a story about Myanmar Buddhists who are persecuting the Muslims of that country.
Right. The refugees that they have over there. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's the Buddhists are not again that it's not really in all of these cases. You can say that it's their religion that's doing it, but it's really not their religion that's doing it. The religion is a it's not a side effect. It's a commonality that they have. It's a catalyst. But it's really nationalism. In all of these cases, it's nationalism and a desire for their whatever their own brand of whatever it is to be the dominant one, and that anybody who's different needs to be bullied into submission.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, and we are getting everywhere the tyranny of the majority.
Yep, it's the tyranny of the majority. That's the theme of the show. Is the tyranny of the majority. It started with the motto on our money being forced on us by a majority, and, which is a minor tyranny, but there's such a thing as the slippery slope, and then there's what it can actually lead to.
India, then we had the churches in Russia, and now we've got the Muslims who are doing it.
Yep, in all three of our news stories, it was Christians being crapped on. I think that's the first time we've ever done that. Where in all three of our news stories, it was the Christians that were taking the shit.
And it's all your fault. You're the one who picked the stories.
I know. I picked the story. Well, I did that on purpose. I saw that commonality, and I picked it that way. That's the first thing I look for. Just for our audience, Nicole sends me all the stories that are going to be on the Infidel, and I go through them and I say, okay, let's talk about this one, and this one. And what I'll look for is, first off, I look for what we talked in the last week, so we're not talking about the same thing twice. And then I look for commonalities so that all three stories can have some kind of commonality. I don't always find that, but when I do find it, I make sure of making a point of it in the podcast when we're talking about them.
Yep. Because there's logic in our madness.
There's but now we're going to do Christian glitches and go right back to the madness of the Christians.
Yes, that'll be fun.
And I heard you just say Congress asked us to look at the rules. What from Congress asked the FCC to look at rules regarding the Internet?
The 1996 Telecommunications Act.
Oh, so it was recent. That was 19 years ago. You seized on that to say Congress was asking you to look at the Internet 19 years later. Well, I would submit to you that something in 1996 had nothing to do with wanting you to take charge of the Internet. And I would also thank you for your willingness to leave some room for exploratory business models and new business models. That's really so gracious of you, because before the FCC stepped in, everybody was able to explore new business models. The only difference is now you're playing God with the Internet, saying, I will decide. We'll leave some room for you to come up with new business models. That's not your job.
Louis Gohmert is such a poor grandstander. He asked the guy a question like it's going to be it's a gotcha question. How would Sarah Palin feel about that question? That was a gotcha question. But then his gotcha was so stupid because the FCC was doing their job.
Exactly.
That was exactly their job.
Well, what I think is also interesting is it's got two facets. He asks the president of the FCC, why, have you done this? And he says it's because of the law of 1996. It was a law that got voted in those days.
Right, the Telecommunications Act of 1996.
Yes, the Telecommunications Act. So, and then after that, you've got Gohmert saying, "Oh, so you seized upon it immediately, 19 years later." Excuse me, what was, they were empowered to do it 19 years ago, so they can still do it today. It's the same thing. It's not as if they waited 19 years to do their job. They've been doing their job for 19 years, but they've been doing this particular one now. So it's not the same thing.
And the thing with the Internet was that what this is all about is that with the Internet, regulating it is very difficult because it's not just a United States thing. Any regulation that you put on it has repercussions outside the country. And also, the Internet was new, and they weren't really sure how best to regulate it until they got to see it in action. if you know anything, I don't know if you know anything about I'm sure you do because you were in journalism, but if anybody in our audience knows anything about radio and how radio came about and what happened there, the government kept stepping in and regulating radio, micromanaging it. And they ended up saying, okay, Westinghouse, you can be in charge of building radios, and RCA, you can be in charge of broadcasting signals, and they put these institutions in charge of and built monopolies. So,
Yep.
yeah. So the FCC has been trying very hard not to do that same kind of thing. They did it. They made the AT&T became a monopoly because the FCC wasn't heavy-handed enough. But at the same time, the FCC was getting pressure from all of these corporations to impose these rules that they called net neutrality, which basically would say the exact thing Gomert says that he's preventing them from doing. If they had allowed net neutrality, corporations would have been allowed to say, okay, we're going to throttle down the amount of bandwidth that we're giving to these small companies so that Amazon and Google can have it all. And then we'd have monopolies again. But with net neutrality, they're saying that, well, because Amazon and Google and other companies like that, not necessarily them by name, but companies like that, I think Comcast was one of the ones they were worried about doing it, was going to charge a premium to these companies for better access to bandwidth. And so, the whole deal with net neutrality was the FCC trying to figure out how best to impose the rules so that small companies could flourish. And it turned out that the best way to do it was to, in their estimation, and I agree with them, was to declare the internet to be a utility.
Yep. And by doing it this way, also it fosters competition, because if it's a utility, they can make they are forced in a way to make their pipelines available to competitors.
Mm-hmm.
The same way, I don't know if it's like that in the U.S., but in Canada, the telephone lines. Eventually, Bell was forced to allow private companies the usage of their own lines. They paid Bell for it, and but and then those companies were able to come in and offer the same services as Bell using Bell's equipment, but they were able to do it at a different price, at a lower price, and that brought in competition, and that made things a lot cheaper.
Right. In the United States, it was AT&T. AT&T was a monopoly. If you ever seen Ernestine, Lily Tomlin's character Ernestine, that was on the phone and she was telling everybody,
yes.
Yeah. That was because the telephone company was like massively overpowering. And so the government came in and they said we're going to break AT&T up into smaller companies that do different things, which is what they originally did with the radio. Again, it's the same kind of thing they did with the radio, where they broke up Westinghouse can do this and RCA can do that, and blah, blah, blah. They did the same thing with the telephone company, but it was all the telephone companies. AT&T, this part of AT&T is going to be in charge of maintaining the lines. This part of AT&T is going to be in charge of long distance. This were local. So they broke it up and made it smaller companies, but it was still under one grandfather. But then they said you also have to make your lines available to these other companies, and that's how we got Sprint and MCI, which I think is dead now. I'm not sure, but I don't hear about them anymore, so I think they're dead. And there's a couple other companies that came about because AT&T had to give them access to their lines. And really, I think they didn't go far enough. What they should have done is the government should have said, those lines that used to belong to AT&T now belong to the people. Mm-hmm. And so any company that wants to use it petitions the government for access to those lines, and then gets access to those lines instead of paying AT&T a premium, because what ended up happening was, like those companies like MCI and Sprint, if it had just been free market, they would have never been able to make it, because they had to pay AT&T for access to the lines. AT&T already had access to the lines.
Yep.
Yeah.
And just to bring things back to the idea of Christian glitches, Gomert was saying that
The FCC was acting like God.
the FCC was acting, godlike. But they're doing their job. Do you say that they're playing? The president is playing God if he's doing his job of governing the country?
Well, Louis Gohmert wouldn't, but yeah.
An agency's job is to do to manage certain things, and that's what those guys are doing. They're not playing God. Gohmert doesn't know what playing God is. How on earth did Gohmert ever make it to first be to have the common sense to be a lawyer, and then after that to become a judge? How can somebody like that have achieved so much and be so dumb?
Yeah. Well, you pass the bar by learning the answers that they want you to put on the test. And then once you have the robe, you can do whatever you want, because judges in this country are generally appointed either by a governor who already has an agenda, or they're elected to their position by people who are swayed by an agenda. So a lot of judges end up having agendas. I think what we need is an independent board actually to appoint judges, but then they would just accuse that board of acting like gods.
Well, that's why I never thought it made sense to have, that's something about the U.S. I never understood, is that how can you have people electing a sheriff or electing a judge? People don't know what it's like, what you need to be a judge, to be a good judge.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
What they do is they just vote based on, who's pushing the best agenda.
Right. But there's really there's no perfect system for it, because like I said, if the governor appoints them, then that's somebody with an agenda. If it's voters, then the voters don't really know why to vote for a judge, this judge over that judge, because they don't know the law. And if it's a committee that does it, the committee is going to be accused of behaving like a god, and B, there's going to be politicking within the committee. There's going to be people currying favors to get the appointments. So there's no perfect system.
Yeah, well, I'm just that reminds me of an article I read not too long ago, where they were saying that lawyers who have to face judges who have to be elected have a dilemma, because the judge is going to say, "Please give me money for my
campaign
raise, my campaign, because I need money to pay for my campaign." And then the guy says, "Well, if I don't give him money, he's going to rule against my client."
Right.
So they have to they're forced to give money to the judges, not, as if the judge is going to tell them, you better, you give me money or else, but it's almost like that.
Yeah, well, they do that. They don't, like you said, they don't come right out and say, "Give me money or else." Maybe they do behind closed doors, but publicly, it's like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge kind of a thing, where you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours, and we both know it. So, yeah, but politics and core and the legal system and everything, it's always a mess. There's no good system, really. We could go back to feudalism and just let the king decide.
Yeah, and the thing is, the king was able to decide, and because the church empowered them.
Mm-hmm.
The church would say, "Yes, you are anointed. You are now the king, and you can rule over everybody. Meanwhile, please let us get as lot of money as we can from people, and don't tax us."
Mm-hmm. Yep, and it's still that way today. We still don't tax them for no good damn reason. Yeah. But anyway,
well, it's history.
Okay. It is. It's history. So we've covered all of our stories. I wanted to let the audience know that I have a new YouTube channel for my fiction podcast. where I read short fiction from other authors. And if you want to check that out, just go to the little bar on YouTube and type in the Thrills and Mystery Podcast, and you'll find that channel and you can watch those videos. What else? You wanted to tell the audience some news about Infidel.
Yes, we've got some news. We've got a new anchor who's going to be joining our team this week. So he's going to be getting his first assignment soon, and in 2 weeks' time, people will be able to see him on the Infidel on Atheism TV channel.
Mm-hmm. And the interview that we did with Mike Newdow is probably also going to be a segment on the Infidel as a special report.
Yes, it will be on this week on Wednesday, actually, to be exact.
Okay.
And next week we've got a special guest. Actually, maybe we should announce our guest so that people might be interested to come back. It'll be Klingshore.
Yeah, unless it falls. Klingshore. Hopefully it doesn't fall through now that we've announced it. But
yes.
But yeah.
So
Klingshore is
will be joining us.
Yeah, we knew last week that we were going to have Mike Newdow, but we didn't want to say anything just in case. So, yeah, Klingshore is going to be joining us next week. So that's look forward to that. So that's everything for today, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so please make sure that you subscribe to the Atheism TV channel. There you can watch the Infidel News for the Damned, where our talented team of writers and anchors present these and other stories not normally covered in the media. In the coming week, the Infidel will rerun today's stories and many more fascinating ones. You'll find Atheism TV at youtube.com/atheismtv. The Infidel Podcast of the Damned is a Nicole SD production. Nicole and I would like to recognize and say thank you to Truth Surge, who did the voiceover used in our intro and gave us permission to use music from his song Lied To as our opening theme. We'd also like to thank Mike Newdow for participating in today's podcast. Nicole's channel is Nicole SD and can be found at youtube.com/NICOLSD. I'm Gamut Man on YouTube, at Gamut Man on Twitter, and my blog and information on my books, including my nonfiction title, Believe It, You Know an Atheist, as well as my mystery novels featuring the atheist detective Lupa Schwartz, can be accessed at tinyurl.com/lupalanding. While there, you can sign up to receive my newsletter. Signing up also entitles you to choose one free ebook title from my collection of 99-cent novellas. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody.